My name's Tom Mensch. I came to work at Cerro Metal Products. It was actually Cerro Copper Brass then, 1962 on August the 27th. And I retired from Cerro Metal Products in September of 2007. So I had about 45 years in here. When I first came to work here, I ran a forge press. And after, I think it was whatever the probationary time was, because it's a union shop, I bid out of that into die cast. And the difference between the processes with the forge press, you take a slug or a piece off a piece of rod and heat it up and put it in a die and forge it. With die cast, we had molten metal, where we'd have closed dies, and then you would scoop out the metal and pour it into the top, and it would go all through the section of the dies. And you'd open it up and then take one piece out, or two pieces or whatever. So then I worked in that shop for probably the better part of a year and a half. My next job was to bid on a quality control job, and I went in the inspection department, and I also filled in the time office at that time, and also for the safety officer who would go on vacation. But basically it was an inspection department, was the final inspection. From there I went out on the floor into floor inspection in the automatics department. This is a screw machine operation where you take rods, put it in 6 reels, and it goes, every time it rotates one section, it performs an operation on the part. To the final portion, it cuts it off, parts it off, and starts in the next process. So I worked down there probably for the better part of 5-6 years. And after that, I bid into that department as an operator. And I was there till 1972. In 1972, I came out of the bargaining unit and came into management. And I started as a safety officer, safety and security here. We had a force of guards that came on. I had 2 guards on every shift that would rotate through the different plants 24 hours a day. And I had that job until I went on to customer service. And I worked in customer service where we'd handle customer complaints and helping a customer come up with a product that they're trying to come up with, this kind of thing. And I worked in that operation for probably 2 years. And there I went into the extrusion department at Plant 4 as a supervisor, shift supervisor. And I worked up there, I don't know how many years, probably about 10 or 12 years up there in the shop. When I was offered the opportunity to come down into the sales department, and again with the customer service aspect of it, then in 1997, they asked me if I would go to our Virginia plant, which was where we had taken all the parts side of the business to Virginia. And so we weren't making any parts here in Bellefonte, we were making rod. But I went down there and we put together a customer service department in the plant in Virginia. I was there for 6 years. I came back home in 2003 and assumed the responsibilities of the manager of the inside sales department here in Bellefonte. And what we did, we had people on the floor who would take orders from different customers all over the country. And then we'd manufacture and set it up, that kind of thing. And so I ran the inside sales department until the company was sold to Bolton Metals in 2005 or 2006, I believe. And I told those people at the time, because I was beyond 65 years old, I said, if you want me to retire, I'll retire. And finally in 2007 in September, they said, yeah, it's time. They were getting ready to close the business anyway, and nobody really knew that at the time, but that's what it was. So I retired actually in 2007 in September. And that's my story. But we made a lot of product here. I can recall when we were making catapult tracks for the aircraft carriers that would be bolted on to the side of the rails, bolted on to the piece that pulled the plane to get it going and get it off the thing. And whenever we had those tracks ready to go to the customer, they were shipped to Philadelphia. They had a inspector from the federal government would come in, and he'd spend almost an entire day on those tracks, just making sure that everything was perfect, on that, as far as flatness and straightness and things of that are concerned. So, we did some very, very interesting things here. We made a lot of fuse rings for the government, for the military. We made a bomb nose out of an aluminum product on that. And in our plant in Virginia, we actually made the M16 rifle, upper receiver, lower receiver, the handle. Those major parts were all made from aluminum, and we forged and manufactured those parts down there, and that was for Colt firearms. But eventually it ended up going to the government. So it's been a very interesting time. We also, when we took our parts business down to Virginia, we had a separate plant down there that did screw machine products up in Shenandoah. Was the name of the town there. And we had probably 20 machines in there, and we had them till they finally closed it down because things were getting too competitive, and so we just closed that part of the operation. When OSHA first came on board, we put together the first OSHA standard for our plant here. And a lot of the things that we did were really in violation of the OSHA standard. And we just did it that way over the years. And so we had to conform to all that. But, it took about 2 or 3 years to really get settled in and get everybody on board with what had to be done. And until you went through the standard and picked out what applied to us in our business, in our operation. And then you brought that out and made a program for this plant, or Bellefonte plant and the Virginia plant. So that was probably one of the bigger challenges we had. We had a plant out in California, I think it was in Newark, California, where we made product for Price Pfister, the plumbing people, and we were their only supplier. And when they were big users out there, but then when everything started to go south on brass with the lead leachate and things like that for plumbing projects, they kept restricting the amount of lead you could put into the brass product. And at the end of the day, the only reason lead was in the brass was to make it machinable. It was almost like a lubrication for the machine tools. So when you removed a lot of that, you had to watch what you were doing because the tools wouldn't last as long. But we got an alloy here that was developed with our labs here in Bellefonte that we could get the lead down to about 0.8, I believe, of 1%, which would allow us to pass a lot of the lead leachate tests out there and be competitive. But it takes a lot of work. And we were fortunate to have the Sig family build this business to what they did. They were felt Bellefonte was very important to them. It was where they were raised and that kind of thing. And when they put this plant together, it was done because it was a family business. And of course, as things developed over the years to stay competitive and everything, they had to bring outside people in and that kind of thing. So it wasn't always a family business, but it started out that way. And it showed because they were partial to veterans. They come back after the Second World War, and that, the company started in 1915 and was doing very well. We were very competitive. And actually, of all the brass manufacturers in the United States, and there was 5 major companies, our company had more alloy offers. And when I talk about alloy, I talk about copper, lead, zinc, bismuth, that kind of thing that goes into it, different products that you make from brass. And we would tailor the alloy to fit the customer's need. And it was a two-way street because they got what they needed. We had a customer that couldn't go trying to beat us up for a better price getting it from another competitor because no other competitor made the product. And our labs and our tool and die shops and things here gave us a real leg up on the industry and made us very competitive for a long, long time. They would, especially Christmas holidays and everything, they would give a lot of time off for the employees, that kind of thing. They just would get their whole management team together, would offer opportunities for other people, make sure they were able to get off for the holidays and that kind of thing. And the union had pretty good agreement with the company. They got along fairly well. But the Sig family were partial to veterans, and so many of the people that I worked with over the years were World War II vets. And all the stories they would tell and everything, but one of the benefits of that was those people were usually always to work on time. They had a way about them, that they weren't late, they didn't miss work, this kind of thing, and they were very dependable, very responsible people. And the other thing that happened was you'd have families. There would be the McKivison family. There was 4 of them that worked here. They're all brothers, and the Richners and people like that. And they were loyal because they weren't going to ruin it for a brother wasn't going to ruin it for anybody else. But the company really saw the benefit of those kind of things. We got very good employees. Well, they had especially up at Plant 4 where we had the big press, the 5,500 ton press, and the platens, the front and back end of the plant, the press was so large they couldn't get it out of here. It would have cost far too much money. They were thick, and they brought them in on railroad cars and things of that nature when they put the press in 1967. When it came time to get rid of all that, it was far too costly to try to get it out of here. So the big portions that they could Well, I think the legacy here has been the opportunity